Is recording already? Okay. Hi guys. Good morning. Welcome back to my channel. I don't really have a channel, so anyways, good morning. How's everybody doing? I hope everyone's fine. I hope everybody is doing great. Okay. For this week's topic, we are still gonna talk about the chapter, the Philippine cuisine. The influences we've had with other countries, the past, the present, and the future. Okay. The goal of for our goal for this chapter is, or objective for this chapter is to explore the history and influence of other countries in the Philippine cuisine, appreciate the traditional Filipino culture in cooking, and assess the influences from other countries that contribute to the structure of the Philippine cuisine today. Okay, let's start. Now, Philippine is located in Southeast Asia. That's why it's Southeast Asia centric Philippines. And when the Spain extended to the New World in 1565, Spain began settling in the Philippines. There was one yearly galleon sailed via. There was one yearly galleon sailed to the Philippines back and forth. Okay, back and forth. And then, as we remember, Philippines is under the government of Mexico at that time, because Mexico was also under the Spanish before. That's why we see resemblance in Mexican food and Filipino food. There's somehow a resemblance, di ba? With the name, with the names of their food. Naimurag pagka pareho sa mga names, di ba? Okay, so there was one yearly galleon sailed at that point in time. For some reasons, maybe the galleon, dili kabot ang galleon sa Padungan sa Philippines because perhaps the pirates got them, or the ship crashed or destroyed by typhoons or waves, or those are the reasons. But for 15 years, wala nakabalik ang mga Spaniards sa Philippines. For 15 years straight, wala sila kabalik. And then, after that, Spain extended Europe to Philippines. After that, the Suez Canal opened in 1869, which made the travel for Spaniards going to the Philippines easier. Okay, so Suez Canal is located here. I don't know if you can see that. Let me zoom it out real quick. Okay, the Suez Canal is located. Where was that? Wait. The Philippines is right here, right? So the Suez Canal is located here. So this is the Suez Canal, if I'm not mistaken. This is the Suez Canal. So when the Suez Canal, see, it made it easier for the Europeans to travel via the Suez Canal. It's much closer. Okay, so at that time, when the Suez Canal opened, it made it easier for the Spaniards to come here in the Philippines. So they traveled back in the Philippines, and years after the Suez Canal opened, Filipinas experienced an increase of European influences, and then years after, America linked North America to the Philippines. That's when American technology and ingredients increased in the Philippine Islands starting at the 1900s. Okay, but we're not going to talk about them first. We'll have a chronological order first. So this is just somehow an overview of the influences, the influences we've had before. And then the Philippine Republic's, no, it's not connected to this, but the Philippine Republic's cuisine is global. So why is it global? You cannot really think of any country in the world without a Filipino. There is always a Filipino. And when there's a Filipino in that country, tendency is he's gonna bring the culture of Filipinos, the culture that we have as Filipinos into that country. Ba, di ba? That's why you see um, even in America or other parts of the world, there's a Filipino restaurant because Filipinos are scattered all over the world. These are also the factors that will affect the taste of the food, the Filipino food. Not only the Philippine food, but also food in general. Okay, when the climate changes, the food is going to be affected. Okay, when change you change something in the location of the food that you are growing, the food changes. And also the migrations within the Philippines, or the greatest influence that we have is from the different migrations that we had in the Philippines, like the coming of the Spaniards, the Spanish, the Indonesians, the Chinese. Okay, so we're gonna talk about it later. Okay, the Asian continuum. When we say Asian continuum, foreign influences are Filipinized, creating a unique culinary culture. What do you mean by Filipinized? Or foreign influences are Filipinized by creating a unique culinary culture. What do you mean by that? It simply means to say that when you want to eat Japanese food and you see a Japanese food in the Philippines, you cannot expect it to taste like how it would taste when you were if you are eating in Japan or in Tokyo or Kyoto, Japan. No, it wouldn't taste like that. The originality of the Japanese food would somehow change because of the ingredients that we will use in the Philippines. And when we put Japanese restaurants here in the Philippines, the primary target market are Filipinos. And in order to capture the taste of the Filipinos, you have to consider the culture of the Filipino, the taste buds of the Filipino. And we have taste buds of uh, sweet, salty, and sour. These are the primary tastes we look for when we eat food, right? So tendency is when we say Filipinized, the food coming the type of food or the Japanese food is gonna be Filipinized, or that the taste is gonna change into a blend of the Filipino culture and the Japanese culture to somehow capture the taste buds of the Filipinos. Okay, that's it. That's what we mean by Filipinized. Now, we are so adapt and talking about the Norse mythology, the myth, the Greek mythology, and other gods and goddesses, Athena, Poseidon, Zeus. We are big fans of the Avengers, where they have gods. Avengers is, I think it's, I mean, the Marvel Cinematic Universe is, I guess it's, so they have Athena. I think it's somehow paralleled with the Norse mythology. I'm not sure, but anyways, yeah, we had gods before. This is pre-Hispanic, huh? We have gods before. We have Ikapati. God is These are deities of food. We had deities of food before. We have Ikapati, the Tagalog gods of the cultivated land. The Mapulon, Ikapati's husband and god of seasons. Yeah. We also had binudbud. You know, binudbud is, you know what binudbud is? Kanang giputos o leaves o leaf, ha? Putos og lahon ang isa ka pagkaon. That's the name of the Ifugao spirit of feast who make guests full fast, di ba? Para dali mabusog ko. No, we have gods like that. The Manubo goddess of friars. We have gods. We had spiritual gods like them before, but it seemed to be forgotten. No movies created about them. But anyways, let's continue. Okay, Asian ingredients 1521, pre-Hispanic. Okay, before the Spaniards came here, we already had bananas. We already had this set of foods are already present in the Philippines before the Spaniards came here. Okay, that's when the Spaniards arrived, 1521. The Spanish arrived, but they didn't begin settling at that time because they began settling when the Suez Canal opened because it made them easier to travel back and forth. Okay, so in 1521, this is the year when Magellan came here. Okay, so these are the ingredients that were already present in the Philippines. Okay, okay. Still another ingredients present in the Philippines. We can now wonder, but we can somehow wonder that these food existed for over 100 years ago, right? It is still existing now. Hundreds of thousands, I think, yeah, thousands of years ago. It has already existed. The Ampalaya, yeah, these wood are already present at that time, and now it's some of them are still existing. Wow, how amazing is that? How amazing is that? They ayo pa ang mga pagkaon no kay magdugay pa inyong relasyon dili yun. No? Ayo pang mga pagkaon kay ma-change pa ang taste. Kamo bitter lang gyapon. Anyways, so the early cooking methods we had before before the Spaniards came here, we ate raw. It's still present now. We still eat raw. Kinilaw nga isda, we still eat them raw. Diba? No cooking. Grilling, we already grilled before. We know how to bake in a pit. We boiled. We used broth before. You know what broth is? Kanang gipabukalan nga karne. Kanang nagpabukal of certain meat perhaps, and then ang sabaw ang tubig nga gigamit pag after sa pagpabukal. So that's the broth. Already had cooking. We already cooked in clay. We were wrapping foods in leaves before, as obviously we do that because um, we had plenty of leaves before. We had plenty of plants before. Okay, containing food in bamboo combs. I think it's still part of uh, the culture of some of the regions in the Philippines that they cook rice using the bamboo combs. Winemaking. We already had one winemaking before the tuba. Hey, we already had that before. Okay, okay. So these early methods or these ingredients, these things. When Magellan came here, he brought a guy named Pigafetta. Okay, his name was Pigafetta, and he recorded everything that he has seen at that time. He wrote everything he has tasted and seen. Okay, so these are the observations he had on our cuisine before. We ate half-cooked food, but karon murag dili na basta we're not even very familiar with half-cooked or rare, medium done. Basta Basta brown na na, luto na na. Yan na ito ang ideology. Basta itom na kayo. Luto na na, okay na na. That's how we uh, that's how we deal with food right with now, ba? He also observed that the Filipino food is very salty, as it is until now. Pakiasin gyapon ng mga Filipinos, right? That's why we have ginamos, we have kanang sapayan bitaw nga kuan. I forgot the name of that. Bagoong, yeah, bago. We have bagoong, diba? Those kinds of things are very are salty, and still present now. It's still part of our culture that we eat salty foods. Rice cooked in bamboo under fire tasted better than rice cooked in earthen pot. Okay, right. Before, because of the culture of the Filipino, we didn't have utensils before. We didn't have any fork. We ate bare hands. That's why when we cook rice, it's not like how it is today. Before they cook rice to the point nga mura siya gahi kayo para dali siya kanang hawidan bitaw inikaon sa mga Filipinos before. Pork served with broth. So natay sabaw sa una no. Natay sabaw, and when you come to think of it, very salty. That means ang sabaw nato sa una pod salty pod. Okay? Pakiasin po ta sa una. All right. Now let's go to another observation. Diba? Wine in jar with red drinking straw. Diba? We already had drinking straws before. We social kayo. We use straw when we drink wine. Diba? We drink straw, but straw is made out of reed sugar cane, or kanang bamboo. Ay kanang I don't know the name of that kanang bamboo nga gagmay. Basta name nga bamboo. Anyways, living alone can make you crazy, guys. Don't do that. Okay? So bamboo. Bamboo kay kung bamboo. Kung gamay, bamboo. Anyways, that's a little side topic. Okay. We were serving dishes out of gold, porcelain, and wood. Imagine that before atong mga plato gold, karon plastic na lang atong tigamit. Before we were datua ta kay sa una kay gold atong ginamit nga plato sa una. Ha? Porcelain of gold. Spoon called gandan used to serve food. Gandan, it looks, but it it's used for serving spoons. We didn't have we didn't use spoons before. We ate bare hands, but we already have serving spoons. Diba? Sa shell kay sa una natay serving spoon. Karon, wow. So salo na lang natay kutsara lagi, pero ang atong gigamit og kaon mo say atong gigamit og kuha sa gikan. Wow. I don't know what happened to us Filipino. Uh, before it made at least before it made sense, diba? So, ate using hands, and our meal before took 5 to 6 hours. Imagine how long it is to eat back then. 5 to 6 hours. Now, let's go to when the Spaniards arrived in the Philippines. Okay, Spanish missionaries instilled Roman Catholic tradition of fasting and feasting. Excuse me, guys, I have to go to the bath. Okay, guys, welcome back to my channel. Okay, a new God's food, because when the Spanish, after this was gonna open, when the Spaniards came here, began settling here, they introduced to us. The Spanish missionaries instilled Roman Catholicism into our tradition, and along goes with it the fastings and feastings. Okay, so these are the Roman Catholic influences before. So we were told to fast. Okay, the fasting foods were fishes and vegetables. And until now, when we say fasting, we don't eat meat. Uh, don't eat meat. it's because of our it's because of the spiritual side of the Spaniards that we need to fast. Uh, we need to fast. We need to fast, and sometimes we need to abstain ourselves. We need to do abstinence in order, kita mukaon, abstinence in order so that when the mind, when nag-suffer na atong mind ato ang body, the last thing nga, the last resort nga mahitabo sa ato ang lawas is that our spiritual side increases. Okay? That's when we begin to to seek for our Lord. That will be our, that makes our faith stronger. That's what they told us before. It makes our faith stronger because we are, when we are abstained, our body become weak, our mind becomes weak, uh, mind becomes weak, and then the spiritual side emerges. So that's what it was before. We also had feasting food. uh, Feasting food, we had meat and pork. Feasting food during fiestas, that's what we eat. We eat a lot of meat and pork. And then told us not to drink a lot of food because it's a sin of gluttony. Where, in which at that time it's really kind of, it's really kind of, it's not possible, or it doesn't make sense nga moingon sila og gluttony. Di ba? Gluttony is when we eat so much food. Bisag busog ni tamukaan niya. That's what gluttony means now. But it's very impossible before, because how can we, Filipinos didn't eat so much before. We didn't have that lots of food. And our food before, we were told to fast. We were told to keep on eating fasting foods before, vegetables and fish. So it doesn't really make sense nga mo enforce sila og gluttony, because we 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 didn't eat a lot. We didn't even eat a lot before, diba? But what they referred to this gluttony is drunkenness. Filipinos, palahubog to sa una. Until now, some of you, ako, di man ko tiginom, man ko palahubog, kamo, gusto mo dyan uminom kay ba ako. Anyways, so, that time, Filipinos would go, jump on ships, kaya sa una kay ang trading sa una kay one man, kanang there's a ship that's gonna stop by the port, then you do exchange there. So Filipinos would go jump on ships, and somehow in exchange for something that they want, they will teach the other culture to on how to make wines. Okay, they import wines they trade wines for that, and that's gonna be bad for the Spaniards because they wanted to tax everything. They wanted to tax everything, so that's gonna be bad for them. So in order to enforce monetary amount into that wine exchange, they had to import wines from Spanish coming here in the Philippines, and enforced a law that the Spanish wines should be the only wines that Filipinos should drink para maura sa ipaliton sa mga Filipinos. Ba? So that's how, di ba, how crazy the world, the world before, the Spaniards before was. Now it's now our faith is not that kind of strict na. It's somehow lax, di ba? It somehow lax now. And wheat flour. Wheat flour. We didn't have wheat flour before. Wheat flour was made to make the host of the body of Christ. grapes. We didn't have grapes before. They introduced us with grapes. Wheat flour before, the Filipinos didn't understand the concept of wheat flour before. Diba? So the Spaniards, the Spanish priests thought nga it would take time for them to make the Filipinos understand what the wheat flour for, what the host or yeah the host for or the body of Christ for. So they suggested instead of making the host or the hostias, suggested that suman na lang kuno ang ilang itaas kanang inigbisa suman na lang kuno ang ilang itaas for that it won't be complicated for the Filipinos to make the host. But the Pope at that time didn't say, I don't know how you will do it. Doesn't make sense. The last it's raising a suman in the Eucharistic celebration is the last thing in his mind. So that's when they teach the Filipinos on how to cultivate wheat flour, to use wheat flour into making the host. And it is told that it is spiritual for one's body. Hmm. The Spanish before enforced also although that the Manila Cathedral should always be the tallest structure. So no structure could exceed the Manila Cathedral. It should always be the tallest building in the place. Okay. Now we have New World influences. So when when the Suez Canal improved, as when the Spaniards came here, that made them easier for Spaniards to come here, and then that's when the New World influence came here also. The influences from the New World. So these are the food that the list of food that were brought to us or we didn't have this food before. This is the influence of the New World. So this food did not doesn't exist in the Philippines before. So we have avocados, kamote, cassava, and not the papaya. It's not from Philippines. However, it's still questionable at this time. It's still questionable because researchers or archaeologists are still researching on on um, on the cultures we have before. So they actually found seeds coming from the 1521 1500s of the 1500s 1500 year old guava seed they found. So it's some of these are still questionable. Maybe some of these food existed in the Philippines already, but we don't really have the right. We still don't have the right research or knowledge in order to prove that they already existed even before the influences we had with other countries. Okay, so next one is the chocolatera. So this is I don't know if you still have this in your homes. My mother still have this in our home. She still uses this in every time we make sikwate. Well, this is the influence of the Spanish. This is where they beat the. No, this is where they mix the 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 what we so call now as the tablilla. The matate is where they make the tablilla. Uh, is where they make the tablilla. I know is the cacao. I don't know how to pronounce it in English. Kikeo, no, I don't. I'm not comfortable saying that word. I'll say cacao. It's where they grind or it's where they kanang i-flat nila ang cacao seeds to form it into um, chocolate, black chocolate, or the tablillas, and then they're gonna mix it in the chocolatera. Then they're gonna use the batidor for that. We still have this equipments at home. It's yeah, it really looks like this. It's somehow golden in color. So when we sell it, will I think it would cost more. I think. Anyway, let's go to Spain. Simple foods could be cooked in the Philippines. So these are the food that can be cooked in the Philippines. So one pot or one step food were the easiest to transport. They were boiled or slowly simmered into guisado, stew, adobo, caldereta, puchero, grill, or roasted asado. So these are the one step food na easily transported. Okay, so when adobo meant something different before, adobo was used a French word used that means nga, ito to put a soldier into his um, armor. So that's what adobo meant before. Okay? Those needing European ingredients used imports that would last a 2-year travel time from Spain, salted cod, grilled olives, food preserves. So imagine this food can last 2 years in the boat because that's the travel time they have to take in order to get to the Philippines from Spain. Okay, so others substituted native ingredients to make possible. Okay, so when the ingredients from Spain that cannot be won't be delivered on time, so they will have to make substitute for the ingredients. So the Carabao milk, the New World peanut, the cashew for almond, paho for olives. Okay, so these were the substitutes they have. Let's go to the next slide. Mexico's simple food could be cooked in Filipinas but weren't. As you have noticed, most of the Mexican foods are somehow we are somehow the same when it comes to names. Diba? It's Spanish in name. Mexicans have this Spanish in names type of food. So these were the food that were could be cooked in the Philippines, but we didn't because we stick to our innate savorings or flavors as Filipinos. So chili pepper did not become a prominent flavor because we were to adapt in the three flavors that we had before: the sweet, the salty, and the sour. So these are the flavors we had or we look for. That's why it didn't become prominent. And we just stick to the Filipino culture. That's why we never had to cook the Mexican food here, even if it's that simple to make. Okay, so now we're going to the Chinese imports to Manila. Their Chinatown called Parian offered cooked food. So Chinese before were here mostly for the reason that they were employed by the Spaniards to man their bakeries and to make wheat bread. So primarily Chinese came here for as laborers for the Spaniards, and they were the one who introduced stir frying. They were the one who introduced stir frying. The Chinese taught us how to stir fry, but then the Spaniards changed its name to gisa. So the Spanish adapted the stir frying and changed it to the name gisa. That's why we use gisa now. Okay. So after the British occupation in 1774, Muslim sepoys from India settled here. That's the funny thing. Muslim sepoys. Muslim sepoys are considered to be a soldier from India. Okay, they were soldiers from India who settled here, in the Philippines. The funny thing is, when they had the chance to go back to India, they didn't, because they thought that um, they were mistreated in India. That's why they thought nga maybe they should stay in the Philippines, marry Filipinas, and then convert themselves into Christians, and then live here. So the kare-kare is traced back to their migration, and later adopted by the Spaniards to be called the curry, kare-kare, beef stem made with ground toasted rice and peanut. So kare-kare is not an, a Spanish influence. The word curry is a Spanish influence, but the kare-kare itself is an Indian influence. Okay, so they were staying in the Philippines, they were given spaces by the Spaniard along the Pasig River. Somehow, food stops. So the influence on food stops came from the Indians. Okay, also they were given spaces along the Pasig River, and they made karihan. So karihan is like payag siya nga gamay, and that's where they say the Indians serve the food. So these things nga we thought we acquired from the Spaniards. We didn't really get them from the Spaniards. We got these influences from the Indians. Like when we say panaderia, or bread panaderia, we say dulce, dulceria, pancit. We serve pancit. It's called panciteria. Although pancit came from Chinese, is a Chinese influence. Panciteria is more on the name itself is more on the Indian influence. Karindira serves kare-kare. It's now adapted by Filipinos as karinderya. Diba? Tindahan or tienda, karihan or kari. Those are in Indian influences on our culture. The karinderya, that came from the Indians. Okay? Right. So even though how much we try to 5656 dirabino, we got a lot of influences from coming from them, which is positive. I mean, it's just amazing to think that these influence came from them. Although we have never really thought nga we have never really kanang dwell into this side tao nga gikan di sa Indian ang verb na karinderya, kung Bisaya na. Di ba? Somehow like that. Well, anyways, let's go to the urbanite menace. So in 1834, Spain opened Filipinas to foreigners and their influences. 1869, that's when the Suez Canal opened. So it made it easier also for the other countries to travel. So that's when we say urbanite menus, these are menus nga makita sa cities or high dense crowd or mooy kanon sa kadaghanang mga tao. Okay? So these urbanite menus. Let's go to the next slide. Urbanite menus. So before, if we try to think of it before we needed, in order to get from one place to another, let's say for example from Bohol you want to go to Cebu, the Spanish enforced visa or permits for you in order for you to travel from one province to another. Imagine, and the visa or the permit only will exist for 30 days. After 30 days, if they want to go to other provinces, they have to renew the permit again. But only if ang mga pari musugot nga tagaan kag permits. Because the priest before wanted so much money, wanted money to extort, and then they think na kung mobalhin si Filipino adto nga province, tendency is maybe si Filipino adto na mopuyo unya ang mga contributions niya para sa adto nga pari nga contributions adto madong sa bag-o niyang gipuy-an. So, it was so hard for us to travel from one province to another before because the Spaniards enforced law that we should obtain permits in order to travel from one place to another. But then when the Spaniards opened Filipinas to the world, these were the things that could go on ships without being taxed. And one thing, Filipinos are not allowed to travel bringing with them food, kay it's part of kung ano man kanang mura na ga transport og pagkaon, so it's a no before. But yeah, when they opened the Filipinas to the rest of the world, these are the things that could be traded but are tax free. So the anato, bread, but kalamay. So these are the food. Okay. Okay. The European ingredients coming in. So these are the famous European ingredients that came from the Europe because it's European. Okay, we have the American cheese, European ingredients, American cheese, and Australian turkey. Oh no, Australian turkey. Australia is not. Well, anyways, just go with it. Champagne, the condensed milk, the York ham, potted ham, Swiss cheese. These were all from the Europeans. Okay, foods of the era served in the Filipino gentry homes. We have arroz a la Valenciana. Do you know what arroz a la Valenciana is? It's like a chow fan, but it's colored yellow. Okay? Wala siyang chow fan, pero ang color niya is yellow. The concept is like chow fan, Joy. Yan na siya. Ensaymada, meat pies, pancit, raspberry, lumpia, fillets, soda, San Miguel beer. Okay. Scientific savers. During the 1900s, this is when the USA introduced to us a lot of new things coming from them. Domestic science, team, nutrition, health, and public safety with culinary arts and science of germs. So this is when we learned that germs existed. So before we didn't know that. It was the Americans who taught us these information, the home economics, the culinary arts. It's American education. Okay, so the science it so this in the scientific savers, these are the things that were not made were not made by Americans, but these are the influences or this but the Americans brought it to us. Dili necessary nga kaning mga butanga ginama sa mga Amerikano, but the Americans are the ones who brought these things to us. Cold storage, or icebox, refrigeration, because of the knowledge of germs, it goes along with it refrigeration or cold storage. But metal box stove, pipe and gas for cooking stove, loaf bread slicer, canned edible oil, and ice crusher and shaver. These were all introduced to us by the Americans. Foods of the American era. Okay, Americans are so great that they introduced to us the birthday cake. Imagine having a birthday without a birthday cake. Wow. American pie, biscuits, cocktail, your favorite cocktail, cookies, evaporated milk, margarine, pancakes, sponge cakes, especially my favorite food, fried chicken. Okay? Americans have popularized also the open house. Open house means before the Spaniards, when the Spaniards Spanish time, in the White House, it was told that Filipinos are not allowed to enter the White House. But when the Americans came here, they said, no, Filipinos are free to come in. So they opened the White House to the public, and schedules, of course, na kung kanino sila pwede makasudid. They also have garden tea party and stand-up reception. They were the ones who introduced them to us. And also the cold storage, a building made by the Americans for cold storage. Salons and resto serving pancakes for the first time. It was the Americans who told us, who introduced this to us. 1912, Manila Hotel became the most modern hotel in Far East. I don't know if it still exists now. I haven't done my research. But at that time, yeah, because we were thought of home economics, national cuisine. Yeah, 1912, Manila Hotel. So that's the end of our discussion for this week. Next week we're still gonna have discussion about the history for the last time about the history. We're gonna discuss about somehow a timeline, more influences from coming from other countries. Fascinating influences, fascinating influences actually. The lechon, the budol fight, some sorts of like that. So we will discuss it next week. Okay, a specific influences coming from other country. So we'll discuss this next week. Okay, guys. So thank you very much for listening. For those who play the video, and keep safe always, guys. God bless, and see you soon. Goodbye, guys.